welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad everyone stopped by today because I've got a really big project for you. Today we are going to be making a baby giraffe. This piece is going to be posable, can stand up, you can fold his legs to make it lay down and whatnot, and I think I'm going to make it roughly about 2 feet tall. So it's going to be a pretty big piece. Anyways, let's get started. First thing we're going to work on is going to be the fabric for the body. I cut everything out ahead of time, and right now I'm just going to show you all the different pieces that I'm going to be using to make the body. For these pieces I'm using a khaki fabric. You can see I have both halves of the neck, both halves of the body, and the 2 sides of the tail. And then all of these pieces are going to be white. These are going to be the halves of the legs that are going to be facing inwards, and then up here is the belly piece for the giraffe. Now before we start sewing our piece, I'm going to be dyeing the fabric, that way we have the markings for the giraffe on the fabric. If you don't want to do this extra step, you can find a giraffe print fabric and use that, but I wanted to do the markings myself. Now what I'm using for this is just watered down acrylic paint. I stirred it up really nicely and made sure there was no lumps, that way it doesn't get stuck in the fur of the fabric. Now if you don't want to use acrylic paint for this, you can get actual fabric dye. I'm just using this because it's a lot easier to get a hold of this, and if you mess up and drip on a counter or something, you have a chance of actually cleaning it up and not permanently staining your workspace. Now the first thing I did to my fabric before I started adding the paint was I got it all nice and wet and I made sure that it was even. After that I added it to the ends of the feet, and with the fabric being damp, it'll actually suck in more of the paint and it'll start drawing it upwards so you don't have to use as much. It also makes a nice fade so that you don't have a drastic line from where you painted and where you didn't paint. For the brown body pieces that are going to have the spots, I did the same thing. I got them nice and damp. For the face, I did a little bit of brown to fade into the neck, and then I started pushing in my paintbrush here and there where I wanted the spots to go. After this dried, I did have to go over it 1 or 2 more times just to make sure the spots looked nice. While our fabric is drying overnight, I'm going to start working on the clay pieces. To do the face of the giraffe, I need my glass jar along with a lump of tin foil. Our lump of tin foil is going to be a lot taller. We want it long, that way we can get the snout of the giraffe shaped properly. So I'm going to cover this all in clay and then we'll start working on the details. After we got the snout covered, I cut some clay off of the sides of it, and I'm going to be placing 2 tinfoil balls here. These are going to be the spots for our eyes. I'm going to cover those up as well and blend them into the face. Now we don't have to make any clay eyes, I'm just going to smooth the surface and then we're going to place the eyelids where we want them. So I'm going to be doing the bottom eyelids first and then we can do the top. After we have our eyes placed the way we want them, I'm going to start adding some details like a few wrinkles here and there, and then we can move on to more of the other parts of the face. I'm going to use a strip of clay to add the lower jaw, and then to make the nostrils I just basically pressed my thumbs into the clay to mark it, and then I sculpted it a little bit more with the tools I had. After I got all the textures and details onto the face, I'm just going to cut the extra parts off of the base of the clay, and then we can bake this in the oven. This will go in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for roughly about 55 minutes, maybe an hour. Okay, now it's time to work on the hooves for the giraffe. I'm going to be making the hoof using two different parts, so we're going to have to bake it twice. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to roll out some clay to make a nice flat surface, and I drew out a stencil, and I'm going to use this to make the base of the hoof. After I have all the bases of the hoofs cut out, I'm going to add the details to it, and then we're going to bake these in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for roughly about 30-35 minutes. After the bases of our hooves have finished cooling from baking, I'm going to use my hot glue gun, and I'm going to be gluing some tinfoil lumps onto the top of them. I'm then going to be covering the tinfoil all in clay, leaving the very top open. After the hooves are fully covered, I just need to shape them into the shape that I want, and then I'm going to add the little divider between the two parts of the hooves. I'll add a little texture, and then these will go in the oven for roughly about 45 minutes at 275 Fahrenheit. Okay, my fabric has finally dried from dyeing, and it's time to start on the sewing. You can see all of our details, of course. The first thing we're going to do is sew the legs. So the white halves of the legs I'm going to pin to the other halves of the legs, and we're going to sew along the lines that we have drawn on the fabric. And I'm also going to sew the tail while I'm at it because it's easy. Next, we're going to sew the neck onto the body. This part is slightly curved, so you'll want to take your time while sewing it. After the legs have finished, we're going to pin the belly piece on and do the sewing for that. Okay, right now this is what the body looks like inside out with the belly and everything all sewn up. Now we're going to work on the tail. The fabric that I already sewn for it, I'm going to fold it right side out, and then I have a little bit of furry brown fabric that I'm going to use for the end of it. So I'm going to sew these two pieces together and then attach it to the base of the tail. Okay, now we can go back to our clay pieces and start the painting. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the hooves. The easiest way to do this is to paint the bottom half first and then let that dry. That way you don't have the paint sitting on your countertops and sticking and messing it up. And then once that's dry, you can paint the sides of the hoof. My hooves are just going to be black, and then after the black has dried, I'm just going to add a little bit of brown at the top of it and blend it inward so it doesn't look like a solid black. And then I'm going to add a little bit of a highlight around the clove of the foot. For the face, I'm going to cover it all in a nice dark brown. Once that dries, I'm going to start adding lighter browns to add highlights to the face, and then we can add more detail. I decided that I wanted the top of the face to be a lot darker, so I'm adding some black to the end of my brush and I'm going to blend it into the paint. Now I'm going to paint the inside of the nostrils and the eyes all black. I added a little bit more yellow highlights to the face to finish that off, and then after the black paint has dried, I'm going to start on doing the details for the eyes. Lastly, I added a few highlights here and there, and then I'm just going to apply a layer of resin over everything and let those dry overnight. Okay, all of our clay pieces have dried now, and it's time to start putting the giraffe body together. So right now I have the legs fully stuffed, and I'm going to start adding the wire frame to the body. For the wire frame with this piece, because it was so tall, I decided to double up the wire. So what you're seeing for the legs right now is 2 layers of 14 gauge wire twisted together. So that's going to be for each of the legs. So I'm going to take these wires and I'm going to push them into the legs that are already stuffed, being careful not to push the stuffing out. After you have the wire in the legs, it's time to add the hoofs. So I'm going to take a thread needle and I'm going to sew the end of the fabric all nice and tight, and then we're going to use some hot glue and place the wire into the base of the hoof. Now we're going to take a nice strip of brown fur fabric and we're going to go and glue that around the base of the hoof to add a little bit more fluff to it. After the wire has been pushed through the legs, we can stand the piece up, and you can see that now I need to attach the neck. For the neck, I did the same thing. It's a doubled up piece of wire, nice and twisted, 14 gauge, and we're going to take a thinner wire to wrap around all 3 of the pieces to connect and make one solid frame. After I have all of the pieces wired together, I'm going to take my hot glue gun and go over the parts that are all connected. That way it adds a little bit more strength to the piece. After the body has been finished, it's now time to work on the giraffe's neck. For this, I'm going to be taking a strip of brown fur fabric and connecting the two halves of the neck. So I'm going to sew along each side of the fur fabric, connecting it to it. So I took out the tin foil from the inside of the face, and I'm going to use my hot glue and I'm going to pour a nice section of it to where I want the wire to connect. After that, I'm going to push the wire into the hot glue, and I'm going to use stuffing to fill the inside of the face and lock everything in. After the hot glue has cooled and you have your face connected to the wire, it's time to add the fabric around the face. So I'm going to use my hot glue and go over the edge and then press in the fabric as we go. Okay, the last little details we need to add to our giraffe are going to be his horns and his ears. For the ears, the liner of the ear is going to be a white felt. You can use whatever color you wanted. I just wanted to use white, and I'm going to glue the back of that onto the fabric that we've been using for the body. I'm going to cut that out and then add a little bit of brown fur for the inside of the ears. For his horns, I made them similar to how I did the tip of his tail, so I really didn't show that off because it was really simple. Now you can see I left two small holes on the head. I'm going to be gluing the ears and the horns into these holes. Okay, and here you have it. Our giraffe is all nice and finished. Okay guys, and here is our new baby giraffe. I love how he came out. He is standing on his own. I'm mainly supporting him because I'm making the cushion lopsided. And he's standing on the cushion that I'm sitting on. So a good reference for his size. I'm 5'3", so he's probably about 2 to 3 feet tall, which is pretty good for an ArtDoll size. You usually don't get them that big, but I really wanted to make something big and cute. So that's what I did. Anyways, he will be up in my Etsy shop, so if anyone wants to buy him, check the links down below and he'll be there until he sells, along with whatever other creatures I have for sale right now. Go ahead and check that out. But yeah guys, thank you so much for stopping by and watching my video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If so, leave me a like, subscribe, comment for more ideas, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!